Welcome to another episode of the How to Fight with a Longsword series, or in other words, the Lichtenauer Tradition Longsword Fencing Basic Course. In this episode, we'll cover a variety of related subjects. Firstly, we'll learn our third guard position and the second half of the Hengen, the Ox. Then we move to a Hauptstücke we have already used in the previous episodes, the Winden. Winden, or the winding as it is often translated, simply means turning the sword. To finish the episode, we'll take a quick look at the concept of fühlen. Now, before we start with the actual subject of this video, please do note that the incorrect examples are executed on purpose so that the issues are easier to see. All the techniques based on the historical sources are shown according to my current interpretations. As such, they are subject to change if I ever come up with or run into a better interpretation. Let's start by learning our third guard position, the Ox. As you remember, Flug was the two lower Hengen. Ox is the two upper Hengen. These two guard positions combined are the Hengen. Stand in a good fencing stand with your dominant foot forwards. Have your non-dominant hand next to your head on the non-dominant side. The point of the sword should be directed at your imaginary opponent's face. You want to have the grip of the sword at least at eye level, preferably a bit higher. The crossguard must be in front of the face when seen from the side. Have both of your wrists straight. You don't want to have the wrist of your non-dominant arm turned to either side. The Ox works just the same on the dominant side. The difference is that now you need to have your arms crossed. This may make it more difficult to have a proper grip with your non-dominant hand. Don't have your hands too far forwards, or too much to the back, or too high, or too low. Also make sure that you do not flare your elbows out in any direction. You also don't want to pull your elbows in unnecessarily. Simply keep your arms and shoulders relaxed. Let's briefly talk about the theory behind Winden. Winden simply means turning the sword. Even though there are 24 defined Winden, I still see this as a concept. The concept in this case is turning your sword so that you close an opening and attack, or go around your opponent's sword and attack while staying in a bind. A bind simply means that your and your opponent's swords are in contact. This basically boils down to the 24 Winden. I will explain them shortly for completion's sake, but don't get scared about the number and having to remember all of them. That is not the point here. How we get to that number is rather simple. We have 4 Hengen, those being the Flug on both sides being the lower Hengen and Ox on both sides being the upper Hengen. As we can wind in all 4 of those Hengen, we get 4. Then we have Inwinden, or winding on the inside, and Auswinden, or winding at the outside. We will be learning about those in just a moment. We can do both of these for all of the Hengen. From 2 times 4 we get 8. Then we have the Drei Wunde, or the 3 wounders, those being the cut, the thrust and the slice. You can attack using any of these 3 using any of the previously mentioned 8 ways to wind. From 3 times 8 we get to 24. As said, you don't need to remember the actual number or how to calculate it. The concept of Winden should become clear after drilling Inwinden and Auswinden. Now a bit of technical theory. To effectively wind, you want to keep the point in place and move the hilt of the sword. This is done by using your dominant hand. This is a result of how basically all proper longswords and longsword simulators are built. If you find keeping the point in place difficult, you are most likely using your non-dominant hand while winding. The non-dominant hand should just follow your dominant hand and not try to control the sword. Our first drill is winding according to the Myers square. This is the same sequence we used in the 4 openings lesson. This exercise is rather simple. You start in one of the 4 hängen. You extend your arms for a thrust, only moving the sword forwards without turning it. You then take a passing step, simultaneously winding to one of the other hängen while keeping your arms extended. Finally, you return to the new hängen. Then you repeat. This is done according to the Myers square. The order of the hängen is dominant side ox, non-dominant side flug, dominant side flug, non-dominant side ox. You can then repeat this pattern indefinitely by winding back to the dominant side ox. The most important thing is to concentrate on keeping your point in place. If the point moves around, the most common reason is using your non-dominant hand to move the sword. Remember that your non-dominant hand shouldn't do anything. It is up to your dominant hand to move the sword. Invinden is something we have already done when thrusting in opposition. We simply turn our sword so that our sword is between us and our opponent's sword. Invinden can be done as in the thrust in the opposition case or as a counter-attack. We will take a look at the counter-attack version in a later episode. In this invinden bed drill, we will take a look at gaining mechanical advantage. As said, this is simply a thrust in opposition. By mechanical advantage, I mean that we wind so that our strong is in the weak of our opponent. Because of the difference in leverage, it is basically impossible for our opponent to parry without getting to a more mechanically advantageous position. For this exercise, both fencers stand in flug at a distance from which it is possible to thrust with a passing step. Thrust in opposition as taught before. That is to wind your sword so that you get your strong to the weak of the opponent. You can do this drill so that you take a passing step and land the thrust. Or you can simply make the wind without a step to concentrate on the winding action and getting your strong to the weak of your opponent. Remember to do the exercise from both the dominant side and the non-dominant side flug. Also remember that the coach must have their sword pointing at the trainee's face. If in a fencing situation you are against someone who doesn't have their point in line, you don't want to chase the blade with the winding. Simply wind as if the point was threatening you. Then let's take a look at Auswinden. This simply means turning our sword so that our opponent's sword is between us and our sword. This naturally poses a threat, as it is very difficult to parry from such a position. Thus, we need a situation in which our opponent can't easily attack us. Generally speaking, such a situation is our opponent parrying our attack. In this way, our opponent is actively moving their sword away from us to parry our attack. If you time your Auswinden correctly, it is possible to land an attack and cover yourself during this small time frame. Trying to do an Auswinden when our opponent is standing with their point in line is a very easy way to get stabbed. Keep this in mind with our drill. Both fencers stand in a non-dominant side flug at a distance from which it is possible to attack with a passing step. The coach moves slightly forwards and or extends their arms to get a mechanical advantage in a bind. This doesn't mean that the coach has to get their strong to the weak of the trainee's sword. It is enough that the coach has roughly the middle of their blade at the very weak of the trainee's sword. The coach then moves the trainee's point of line and by doing so moves their own point of line as well. Now, as the coach's point is not threatening the trainee can attack using an Auswinden. They wind to their dominant side and land a thrust with a passing step. After the trainee can land the thrust consistently, they should start to cover themselves after the thrust. This can be done with an invinden or by simply making a sideways parrying motion so that the coach's sword is to the trainee's non-dominant side. It is important that the coach doesn't parry too wide. This makes it very difficult, or basically impossible, to use Auswinden. In such a situation, something like Durchwechseln would be a more appropriate technique. We'll get to that in the next episode. As already mentioned, it is important that the coach doesn't have their point in line. If they do, it would be trivial for them to land a thrust during the Auswinden. Next we get to fühlen and the terms soft and hard. Fühlen simply means feeling. That feeling being the ability to tell if your opponent is soft or hard in the bind. If your opponent is soft in the bind, it means that you are able to move their sword even without a proper mechanical advantage. If they are hard in the bind, you are not able to move their sword without a clear mechanical advantage. That mechanical advantage being having your strong in their weak. At this point, it is very important to note a few things. Firstly, this is one of the things which is a great deal easier when fencing with sharp swords. As sharp swords bite into each other, it is a lot easier to feel what is happening in the bind. On the other hand, blunt training tools, especially feathers, generally just slide along each other, making this a great deal more difficult. Secondly, these drills are rather artificial. The idea is to isolate the fühlen part of a fencing exchange, as fühlen is very difficult to do with a blunt training tool. Thirdly, fühlen is mostly important in an equal bind. That being a bind where neither of the fencers has a clear mechanical advantage. If one of the fencers has a mechanical advantage, it doesn't make much of a difference if the other fencer is soft or hard in the bind. If you have a mechanical advantage in the bind, Invinden is generally speaking the safest option. Let's start with a very simple fühlen exercise. The coach stands with their arms extended and with their dominant foot forwards, just like if they had completed a thrust from the non-dominant side Flug. They are rigid and try to keep their sword in place. The trainee stands in a dominant side Flug. They are at a distance from which they end up in an equal bind if they thrust with a passing step. Equal bind in this case means that roughly the midpoints of the fencer's swords are in contact. After coming to a bind, the trainee gives slight pressure against the coach's sword. They should feel that the coach's sword doesn't want to move. This means that the coach is hard in the bind. Return to the starting position and repeat. In the second fühlen exercise, the starting situation is the same, but this time the coach doesn't try to actively keep their sword in place. They simply stand in the stance they have, with their arms extended and the point threatening the trainee. Once again, the trainee comes to the bind and gives slight pressure against the coach's sword. This time they should be able to take the center line and displace the coach's sword. This means that the coach is soft in the bind. Return to the starting position and repeat. For the third exercise, the initial situation is the same. This time the coach can choose between being hard or soft. They must do so before the trainee binds with them. After coming to the bind, the trainee once again uses fühlen to determine if the coach is soft or hard. After that, they must state which they think the coach is. The coach can then say if they were wrong. Return to the starting position and repeat. Especially in the beginning, it is important that the difference between soft and hard is very clear. For the last exercise, note that the situation is very artificial, and there are a great deal of better solutions to this kind of situation. The starting situation is almost the same as for the previous drills, but this time the coach has their point slightly offline. Once again, the coach must choose if they are soft or hard before the trainee binds with them. The trainee must come into an equal bind. They are not allowed to come to a mechanical advantage or to wind to a mechanical advantage. This once again makes the exercise rather artificial, but it allows you to train fühlen. In the bind, the trainee gives slight pressure against the coach's blade to feel if they are soft or hard. If the coach is soft, the trainee trusts using invinden. If the coach is hard, the trainee trusts using auswinden. Return to the starting position and repeat. Remember to do this from both sides. Remember that the coach is not allowed to have their point in line. This makes it even remotely sensible to have Åsvinden as part of the exercise. When the trainee comes to the bind, the coach is not allowed to parry to the side. If the coach is hard in the bind, they must still simply maintain their position. Before we get into the recap, go and stab that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Ox is one of the Verläge and the other half of Hängen. In Ox, you want to have your hands at eye level, preferably a bit higher. You also want to have the crossguard in front of your face when seen from the side. Winden simply means turning the sword. The concept is to turn your sword so that you can close an opening and attack, or go around your opponent's sword and attack while maintaining a bind. Inwinden means winding so that your sword is between you and your opponent's sword. Auswinden means winding so that your opponent's sword is between you and your sword. Fühlen means feeling. More specifically, feeling if your opponent is soft or hard in the bind. If your opponent is soft in the bind, it means that you are able to move their sword even without a proper mechanical advantage. If your opponent is hard in the bind, it means that you are not able to move their sword without a proper mechanical advantage.